Tune in weekly and listen to the Collateral Damage podcast, where Michael Wilson and Maureen Cavanaugh host a variety of special guests to discuss topics and available services that will help you learn about the impact that substance use has on our lives, our families, and on our communities nationwide. Episodes and listening information can be found at www.cdpodcast.com. You can also search for Collateral Damage Podcast on your favorite listening platforms or watch previous and future episodes on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe and share. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Collateral Damage. Here with my special co-host, Maureen Cavanaugh. And I think today what we wanted to talk about was different forms of intervention. I'm sure a lot of people hear that word, and it's a big, scary word, and it's full of all different types of stuff. I know that if you've never been through one, I imagine that you're thinking about like the TV show, or you're thinking about something you saw in a movie, or, you know, maybe when you were younger, your family did one on some uncle or something like that, right?
I've never seen the television show.
Oh, okay.
Well, I think I turned it on once and they were showing people using, and that kind of, I was like, that's just not necessary. So I never watched it again.
I
guess
see that
maybe
being
I should.
hard to watch.
Well, it's not even that it's hard to watch. It's just like, okay, we already know that part. That's why, you know.
Well, not everybody does. I think that's why they do it. I remember, when I was in Middleton and I was at the, when I was at the 80-bed drug program, they, I think it was run by some external organization at the time, but they would have us watch that show. They would have us watch intervention, throughout the day. They just put it on, and reruns and
Seriously?
Yeah, it was weird.
That's weird.
I'm not gonna lie. I don't know. I'm sure there was some intention behind it, but I mean, we would literally just sit out there and watch episodes of intervention, and I think that I learned a lot about what it meant and what it looked like and what people were trying to do and stuff like that. But the show is just one. I know that everyone's seen, like maybe The Sopranos intervention, which was hilarious. If you got a minute and you Google The Sopranos intervention, that's not what we do. But it's definitely worth a watch because it's funny. Or, any movie or something like that, you see, someone hires a man or a woman to come in and say the things that the family hasn't been able to say to get someone to agree to go to treatment.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
I think the more I learn, I think the mistake is that people wait too long for something like this. They wait until everybody's desperate and because and we were talking about this earlier, is I know that I thought that if I couldn't fix it, that probably nobody else could either, because I knew my daughter better than anybody else.
Right.
And now, after having gone through many years of this, and many times with other families going through, being involved in their lives and seeing them go through it, I realized that it was that was exactly what we could have used in the very beginning, is somebody else stepping in. Because I may have known her, but I didn't know her in this way.
Right. Well, you didn't know her addiction. I mean, you may know your daughter in the same way I know my child. And you and I were kind of joking about this earlier, is that, I know my child better than everybody, and I can manipulate them into, what I want them to do and get them help. But they own me. They know me better than anybody. And you know your child, but you don't know their illness, their addiction, or, what it takes to help get them to change their mind or what motivates them. I think your book titled "If You Love Me," you know what I mean? Like, it says it all right there. I don't have to read it. It says "If You Love Me."
You're going to read that book, I swear to God.
I will. But
it's I mean, I thought that the two of us were like this, and I was in her head and she was in mine, and that may have been true to a certain extent, although I learned that, of course, that's not possible before and after, but definitely not in the middle of it, So I was still behaving as if she was this person before the addiction.
Right. Approaching her the same way, thinking she was motivated by the same things. And I guess that's the craziness, is that you're right. It does, the idea of having an interventionist step in, or having somebody, a qualified professional step in and educate the family.
Yes.
It is humbling. I would say that, if I had to have somebody come in, I'd be I'd be uncomfortable with it in the beginning. It would be hard to trust them. I've got my child or my loved one making promises to me, and I'm like, oh, I want to believe them. And then I've got this other person saying that my loved one's probably lying to me, that what I think I know, I don't know. It's hard. It's a
Well, I
lot.
wonder if it's a little bit too that, you spent your whole life now parenting this child, and you don't want, and you're feeling like a bad parent. So if you
Mm,
feel like if you can get them to the other side of this, then you're redeeming yourself in some way.
yeah.
And I don't know if I consciously thought that, and I don't even know if it was, but I know that I was so incredibly sick. And that's really what that book is about. I was so sick. I was as sick as
Hmm.
she was, if not sicker. I
Just in
think
a different way.
yeah. And I would have really benefited from somebody coming in and taking over a little bit
Hmm.
with, as far as how my family should interact with her, and being able to listen to somebody that knew a little bit more than a lot more than I did
Right.
about the addiction, not necessarily my daughter, because the amazing thing is I'm finding now as I work in this field, the people that we love that become addicted, and also the families, everybody's remarkably the same.
Yeah. Yep.
We are not unique in almost in any way. We may have different situations, things that
Mhm.
happen, but we're all so much the same.
Right.
And I know that from how many responses I get every day from that book saying, oh my God, you got in my head. How did you know
Right.
all these? It was like, because we all do the same sick things, because this is the worst, I think, one of the worst things in the world that can happen in your family
Right.
is watching your child, your loved one, slip through your hands, and you really do need that voice of reason to come in.
Mhm. Well, it's an illness. And I guess this is where I get so many people that get hung up on, is it a disease? Is it a choice? This is an illness. You know what I mean? Like the flu isn't a choice, like you can maybe choose to be near someone that has it, but once you have it, the symptoms aren't up to you. Like we all have the same symptoms. We all cough, sneeze, sore throat. I mean, that's why they sell medication to address the symptoms, because they're all the same for everybody.
Right.
And the same could be said with this, that those are the symptoms, right? The craziness that we get into, the parents going through this, the loved ones going through that, those are the symptoms of the illness. And we're all going to have the same ones, even though we're different and special and unique people. Our symptoms are not, our illness is not. And that's why, as an interventionist, stepping into a family system and being able to talk with a family about their loved one's illness and help them understand it, and talk to them about a part of their loved one that they don't fully understand just yet, and what it's
Right.
going to take to address that. I think that's important,
Yeah.
and scary, but important. I think for a family to admit, like you said, that I'm not going to be able to fix this and redeem myself for whatever I think I'm at fault for here, and that I've got to take a step back and let someone else try. And that's, since regular parenting doesn't apply when it comes to addiction, I don't care how good of a parent you are, you could be
Right.
awesome. And
Right.
it's not an implication that you're not. There's nobody saying that you're a bad parent because this happened, but regular parenting doesn't apply. So applying more of the same parenting that you've been using up to this point
No matter how good it is.
could be awesome.
Right.
Could have worked on other kids. You know what I mean? You could have 3 kids that are doing great and you got one that's not. It's not
Right.
your parenting, it's the illness, right? So since regular parenting doesn't apply, having an interventionist or anybody, any professional step in and teach you. It's about teaching you more effective ways to parent somebody struggling with this illness. What about diabetes? Well, if my kid has diabetes, regular parenting doesn't apply. I have to make adjustments based on what's happening inside of their body. I have to learn about the illness, learn about different ways to feed them. I have to learn about different ways to measure their blood sugar, what I can do, what I can't do, what activities are too stressful. Regular parenting no longer applies. Now I need special parenting.
Right.
Happens with every other illness except this one. And we get mad because our regular parenting isn't working.
Right. Because I thought that if I loved her, because I loved her so much, I was just going to love the addiction right out of her,
Yep.
and that I think that, God forbid, had anything happened to her, had she passed away, well, lots of things happened to the poor thing, poor kid, but um, I think that if she had passed away, I would have thought that I didn't love her enough. And I
Right.
hear parents say stuff like that all the time. And the truth of the matter is we got very lucky. And that she looks back on how much I loved her as a good thing, that she will always know that I loved her through this. But it did not make her well.
No,
No,
no.
I did not love her into wellness at all. That is not
Well,
what
and
happened.
But love is it's there's so many different ways to love somebody going through this. You know what I mean? To love without boundaries, I think, is unhealthy for everybody.
Mhm.
And that's where I think I get a lot kind of hung up with families, is that I start talking about the changes they need to make in order to help their loved one because they love them. And they see it as, well, you're telling me I have to stop loving them. You're telling me so I only know how to love by giving, providing a safe place, putting food in their belly, like all, the normal parenting love,
Right.
right? I know how to parent love. But what you're telling me is that I have to love them in an uncomfortable way. I have to love them in a way that makes me feel like I'm not doing it effectively. And they're telling me that I don't love them because I'm not doing it in a way that's familiar to them.
Right. And, one of the big things I think for me and for a lot of people is giving them that choice of whether they get into treatment and remain sober and live in your home or or don't. You know what I mean? That it's a choice. You're not throwing them out. You're giving
Right.
them the choice of whether they live there or whether they don't live there. And if they want to live there, which I wanted her to live there too, but
Right.
I needed her to make these choices in order to make that possible. And that didn't look like somebody, maybe to a lot of people,
Hmm.
wouldn't didn't look like, how can you love your daughter and not have a roof over her
I
head
bet
and
it didn't
know.
look like it to her.
And it really didn't look
Not at
like
the
it to her
time.
at the time, but now
Yeah.
she knows.
Right.
And I see her just recently going through it with somebody that she knows and saying all the things I said. Well, it's a choice. They
Yeah.
took them. I'm like, oh my God. She tells me the things she says. So I know that those things were right, that I was
Hmm.
doing that I definitely was doing the right thing. And the maintaining that doing the really hard thing sometimes means that show is how you show somebody you love them.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that the phrase tough love gets thrown around all the time. And, I try not to use the phrase because I think it confuses people.
Right. I think people mix it up with cutting somebody off.
Well, yeah, because
I mean, really cutting somebody off.
sometimes the hardest thing you can do is love somebody appropriately.
Right.
Sometimes the toughest thing that you can do is to find a healthier way to love somebody that's so dangerous, right? I mean,
Exactly.
there's nothing wrong with me saying that you can't do what you're doing at my house. I can still love you. I can emotionally support you, but in all honesty, I could be providing you with a safe place to do drugs and you have a better chance of dying at my house than elsewhere.
Exactly.
That's that that's a choice I get to make. And it would be tough for me to do that. It would be tough for me to say you can't live here. It would
Right.
be tough for me to say I can only support your efforts to get into treatment, or I can only support your efforts to get well. I can't support your efforts to stay sick, or I can't support your actions to continue using. That's hard. That would be
Right.
really hard, especially if you're a parent and you feel
It's
like there's like an obligation. I have to, nobody else will.
Yeah, it's very difficult and not right for everybody. Everybody's got to
Correct.
do what they feel is best in their own family and what they can live with, because sometimes this does not end well, and
Hmm.
as we all know,
No.
all too often. But I anyway, I think that earlier on in my whole journey, had somebody, and I did have that, because we talked about that to a certain extent. I had that with Matt,
Yep.
but in a different
Oh yeah,
role.
that's right. Yeah.
That he was sort of talking to Katie, and I realized after a certain amount of time that he's the one that should talk to her about this, and I
Yeah.
should say, how you doing today, honey? I love you very much. Did you eat? Did you, the
Yeah.
mom things? I could be mom, and somebody else could do the things that I didn't know anything about.
Hmm. Talk to her about the part of her life you didn't understand, nor could
Exactly.
you help her work through, nor could you identify with, and nor could you provide, adequate options to address.
And something, I don't care if you're in recovery, you can't do that with your own child.
Not if you're emotionally compromised, you can't.
Absolutely not. And that's
No.
why, and I think that sometimes I see that when someone's in recovery and their child is struggling, it's almost worse,
Right.
because it's like, I did this, you do this. It can be, and that's, I think people like families like that need somebody to come in even more.
Yeah, there's a lot of projection there. There's, this is what worked for me. This is what you need to do. And if you don't do this, you won't have what I have. And I mean, that's to some extent very true.
Mhm.
But as a parent, I think that it's probably not a great idea to project your recovery experience on them. It definitely turns them off. I mean, I'd be more likely to listen to a stranger tell me about how they got well than listen to one of my family members tell me how they got well.
Yeah, we experienced that in my family too, because Katie's dad is struggled with alcohol,
Okay.
and quit drinking years and years ago. So he was like, "I did it. You can do it. If I did it, you can do it too."
Right.
Nobody wants to hear that.
Not
Not
from
from their
another family
parents.
member.
No.
No. Well, that's what I'm saying.
No.
And having a professional in there. And I mean, I guess this is what we keep referring back to, whether that professional is the interventionist that does the traditional intervention, that when you hear that word, you might be picturing in your head where we all sit down with letters and boundaries and,
Right.
there's a treatment option that day, which is probably what most people think of.
Yeah.
But there's a variety of forms of intervention. I would say anything that you do to proactively disrupt that situation would be a form of intervention. Getting educated and working with someone to learn about communication and boundaries is a form of intervention. You are changing the system around that person
Right.
so that it no longer continues. Or it can be direct, coming at you. Listen, this is how I feel about what's happening. I need to ask you to stop using. That's a form of intervention.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it never even gets brought up. I get a family that may call me and say, we've been going through this for 5 years. And I'm like, well, what kind of conversations are you having about this? And they're like, oh, we don't bring it up because we don't know what to say. And I'm like, oh, all right. So we have to start somewhere. Let's get in there. And it's
Right.
like you said, why wait until the wheels fall off years into it when you could actually start? Maybe before it gets so bad, you could start by changing the way the family understands it, the way they respond to it, the way they would talk to each other about it, or more importantly, just how they feel about it. Like,
Right.
I don't want to feel like this is my fault. Can somebody help me with that? Like, I don't want to feel like there's nothing I can do. Can somebody help me with that? It'd be
And I
great if
think
we could do it in the beginning.
And I think a good intervention heals the whole family. So you may develop skills in that intervention
Hmm.
that you can use in other things with other family members, and just in creating a stronger bond with the whole family,
Right.
because you've gone through this now and you've learned how to work something that seems like insurmountable. You've
Hmm.
learned how to work that out. So there's a lot of value in these things.
Oh, yeah.
Um, how do you find, how do you find a good interventionist? What are you looking for?
Well, I mean, you definitely want to have somebody that's got experience in the industry.
Mhm.
It's wonderful if you can find somebody that has personal experience that they bring to the table. It's great to, I know that as a person in recovery myself, when I sit down with families and they hear that I'm well, I'm immediately a power of example. I'm proof that it can work. And I think
Yes.
that really motivates them to drive through a process they might otherwise feel pretty scared about. So having somebody that's either a person in recovery or a family member that's got some personal experience might be nice.
Mhm.
More importantly, educated, qualified. I mean, there's a variety of different forms of intervention, everything from what would be called a 12-step call. A 12-step call is usually somebody that's in recovery that will go out and talk to somebody that's not and see if they can get them to agree to go. And that's usually not done by a professional. It's usually done by a peer. And it usually doesn't involve a formal process. It's more informal where, somebody will reach out to somebody that's in recovery and be like, hey, can you come talk to, Joe and see if you can offer him some insight or a way out,
Mhm.
or that might also be some form of recovery coaching or something like that, which is a little more casual. With an interventionist, I would say you want somebody that's done a couple different trainings, has a couple different models that they can bring to the table. Maybe somebody that's a member of an organization like the Association of Intervention Specialists, which is a national organization, or somebody that has a certification, which is a certified intervention professional.
So I see that, the CIP.
CIP, right?
And what is there's a couple of others, right? There's the Arise one too. That's the
Well, the CIP,
CAI, right?
right?
Is
Well,
Arise.
the CIP is the national certifying
Ah,
organization. It used to
okay.
be one in Illinois, which was board certified, and Pennsylvania Certification Board has become the certification for
Mhm.
interventionists.
Right.
Interventionists can be trained in multiple modalities. The Arise would be one of the models. Ours, the CFI, would be one of the models. The Storty model. There's a whole bunch of the
Johnson, which is what
Johnson model, exactly.
that's the the one that everybody I think is most familiar with. That's the television show type of
Right. Well, I mean,
intervention, right?
the Johnson Institute taught everybody about intervention, decades ago, and it became, the foundation on which a lot of these were built. The surprise model, the letters, the opportunity to go to treatment and stuff. And then, there's been a lot of breakoffs. There's been the,
Right.
Arise, which is the invitational. There's the CFI hours, which is, heavily
Family
family focused.
focus.
And so there's all these different models that you could be trained in, but ultimately you want somebody who has or is pursuing their CIP, which would tell you that they're held to a certain ethical standard. They've signed a code of ethics. They have a board or a certifying agency that's trained them that you could reach out to and check.
Yeah.
That's always a good thing. If they are, certified Arise, there's a registry for that. You can contact the directors and find out. Same thing with our CFI. There's a registry on our website. You can see who's been trained, who hasn't. You can contact us directly. If someone says they are and they're not, we'll let you know.
So if I was looking for somebody, and say I was coming to you and I wanted a couple of parents or a couple of family members that had gone through with you, would you be able to provide that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I think that's
would that
definitely
be like
something.
a thing that you could ask somebody that you
Oh
would?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
mean, that's it. I mean, if you come to me, I'm never going to tell you I'm just okay.
Right.
Why
Nobody's
would
going
I
to
do
do
that?
that.
That's
Yeah.
silly. You
Right.
know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
you can go to anybody and they can tell you that they're great. You should come to me. This is going to be wonderful. But, I think getting feedback from other people is huge. And, there's a lot of, I think family support groups, they definitely talk. You can
Oh, yes,
bring
they do.
someone's name to a family support group and you can
Yeah.
find out usually from there, like what they've heard, if they've got personal experience, what type of person they are. Not every interventionist is the right intervention for your loved one,
Right. Right.
or interventionist for your loved one. So like, reaching out to those peer support groups and communities, Facebook communities and stuff like that, I think you can get a lot of feedback.
Yeah. I always say Magnolia is like the Angie's List of addiction.
There it is. Yeah.
Because you go on there and you ask any question and I guarantee you that somebody will have an answer.
Right.
But, I think that, I think that I don't see a lot. I mean, there's a couple of names, yours being one of them, that floats around as being someone that's good. But
I've been told my name gets around quite a bit. I don't know if
it,
that's good or bad, but it gets around. Yeah.
it's on a bathroom wall somewhere, I think.
Yeah. For a bad time, call this number. Yeah. They'll intervene on you.
Oh God. Yeah. So, so that's good. That's good to know that you can, that's a question that you can ask an interventionist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, how long have you been doing this? What's your approach? What models have you been trained under? Is there, can we speak with a family member or two that you've worked with and hear about their experience? The other one is what types of consultations. I think a good consultation means that someone will take the time to sit down with you and figure out if they're a good fit for you.
How long would that be? Like an hour or so, right?
Yeah, an hour or more, I think, is a good enough time. I mean, you're talking about someone's life, their history, who they are as a person. I think you can get like the gist in 20 minutes, but to truly investigate a situation and find out, what you'd be recommending and stuff like that, I would definitely put that around an hour or more, hour to an hour and a half, something like that.
So I've noticed that a lot of the treatment centers now are employing their own interventionists.
Right. And I think it's a tough one. I mean, it's at the, like, I understand the reason behind it. I think the good ones are interventionists that are not just sending people to their own program, right? That they'll intervene no matter where you're going. And I guess that's hard to determine. I mean, I'm not there, so I don't know.
I mean, after, I just did a training with a bunch of people that were interventionists that were doing interventions at various treatment, a lot of them at various treatment facilities. And they were being trained in a different model. And I mean, that was something that was something I was wondering about, because I think you just have to be aware that more than likely they're doing this intervention because they are expecting that you're going to send your family member to this particular treatment center. So that's not your only option.
Right. And I guess the situations where, I feel like that would be appropriate is if you've contacted a program that you'd really like your loved one to go to, you like that program, and they provide in-house intervention services that can help you accomplish your goal and your loved one's goal of getting into that program.
I agree.
And I think that's the model. I think that's what it was based on. But at the same time, who decides that? Was it just because this program was my first point of contact and I didn't know any better? I
Right.
called an 800 number that I saw. That doesn't mean that I've done due diligence and researched the program. So in
Right.
addition to who your interventionist is, I would recommend just as much due diligence into the program, that you're calling or reaching out to. And I would do the same thing, reach
Yes.
out to those peer support groups, reach out to other families, or ask the program, is there a family I can talk to, or a
Yeah.
couple, two or three. It's in the same way that you might take your college age child to go look at colleges before you drop 20 or $40,000 for a year to have them go live there part-time throughout the year. Like, you're going to go there. You want to meet people. You want to talk to other parents. You're going to do your due diligence, I would hope, before
But
you invest that kind of money.
but it's amazing how many people don't, because they're in such a state of fear.
Right. I can see that.
Yeah. So, but
Oh,
it's good to know that, just because that intervention was, it was offered, doesn't, you have to pick the place first.
right. Well, or you have to work with the interventionist and say, maybe I don't necessarily feel like this is the right place. An interventionist should never push you to a program.
Right.
I
Lots of
mean,
options.
yeah, I mean, I always present at least 2 or 3 options and help people understand the different levels of care, and encourage them to do their own research. And I guess that's the key, is that if you're sitting if you're sitting in an intervention with somebody and it feels like they're pushing you to a
Yes.
particular program, there
Yes.
might be an agenda in there somewhere, and that's where things start to get a little tricky.
So we experienced that, and
Oh,
early
okay.
on, that was my first experience with intervention, almost
Mhm.
experience with intervention, is that the interventionist kept pushing one particular place,
Oh,
which made me not want to go to that place, because I was like, this is not,
yeah. Why? What are we doing here?
yeah, why is it all about this place? So that was alarming to me, because
Hmm.
this was supposed to be a private interventionist.
Okay.
So we did not do that because of that reason, and I think,
Hmm.
looking back, I think that was probably a good idea.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
but
mean, I guess, like you're saying, if people are coming from different programs and they're doing these intervention trainings, it's like, what position do you have back at the company that you're implementing
right,
this tool, this service? And
right.
I've done trainings for staff, intervention trainings for staff
Hmm.
for programs, and I think that
And that's
what,
wonderful that they want their people to be
yeah,
trained in a way that, is to have this knowledge, I think.
right. And I mean, yeah, exactly. Like, what I'm sure these tools, they transcend the intervention experience right into case management, to working with families, to aftercare planning. Like, it gets in there. It's very useful information. But um, to your point, there's some ethically questionable situations across the board, whether it's from intervention to treatment
Yes.
to prescribing. I mean, if you're watching the news, then you know what I'm talking about, or if you're
Yep.
on Facebook, then you know what I'm talking about. So it's out there, and like like any other consumer, yes, it's the fault of the people out there that have these unethical practices, but it's the responsibility of the consumer to do their due diligence, to ask the questions, to know that it's not your only option.
Right.
Like, compare.
And I think, with anybody, with any private interventionist, and I know that I even do this when somebody asks me a question. I ask lots of questions about the person. So
Hmm.
as an interventionist now, you've gotten all this information about the person,
Hmm.
and you have access to all these different places. And when I say access, I mean that you know about them, and you know
Right.
people that work there, and you may have even been to a lot of them.
Hmm.
And I can kind of think to myself, there's 3 or 4 places that I think that might work,
Right.
in that, with that insurance, and that particular person, and their, what they liked before, what they were, what excited them before they started using drugs,
Right.
and what might click if they have, a mental health issues, they have eating disorders.
Hmm.
There's lots to take into consideration, so that one size doesn't fit all. And
Right.
it's good to have that advice, but I think it's good to have choices too.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I mean, probably one of the things that I run into, as an interventionist, I run into this all the time, is that families will call, already having done so much research, read so many books, to the point where they are about to do their own intervention. And they call and ask if I can watch, just show up and be there. Or they'll call on a Thursday and they're like, we want to do it on Saturday. And, or They're just calling to see if I can tell them how to do it over the phone, and I guess considering what's at stake, oftentimes that concerns me.
Yeah.
That like I wouldn't call a plumber and be like, do you think you could just tell me how to do it over the phone? I don't actually want to hire you to come in and do this thing. Could you just tell me how to do it? Or watching YouTube videos to try to figure it out. And I'm not saying I couldn't figure it out, but in this situation, there's a human life at stake. And I imagine that if you are the loved one of somebody struggling with addiction, that you are somewhat emotionally compromised to the extent that if you were to sit down and try to facilitate something like this, it would be really hard to hold them together, hold everybody else together, and more importantly, hold yourself together and stay on track, to not get emotionally invested or involved and, keep things from falling apart. And
such a hard thing to do. Impossible, I think, if you're involved.
right. It doesn't mean don't try. It doesn't mean, I'm just saying that I get people that somehow are asking if I can be involved in that or if I can advise in that. And I would never, if it's gotten to the point where you've called me, I would never advise that you just go in and do it yourself. I would say that if you go in and do it yourself and you don't get the results that you're looking for, please call me back. And then we can sit down and we can go over it together and figure out what you've been trying and what we really, what can we do about this? But it's really hard to recommend that you go do what you've probably been doing repeatedly for years again and hope for the best.
Right. Only call it an intervention this time.
Right. Or write letters. The thing is yes, we have letters, but we have letters that are written a very specific way to accomplish a very specific result. And the letters are not the intervention. Whereas if you just told me to write an intervention letter for my loved one, I'd probably write something that was pretty finger pointing, pretty aggressive, trying to convince them that they're sick and trying to force them to go to treatment in some way. And that's not an appropriate letter. But why would you know that?
Exactly. Yeah.
So again, I'm not saying that some of those aren't successful, because I do get those people that call and they're like, oh, well, we actually sat down and asked. And maybe that's the scenario where this has been happening for 5 years and nobody's ever asked.
Right. And this is something different. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, why don't you go ask them, see if they were in it? And they come back and they're like, yeah, they're going to go to treatment. I was like, see, all you had to do was ask. But
for most of us who have asked repeatedly.
Yeah, I don't get a lot of those calls. But if I do, it's always worth being like, hey, has anyone actually asked them?
Yeah.
Has anyone said, would you be willing to go? Because there's no sense for us to go and do an intervention and assume that they're unwilling unless someone has identified the fact that they're unwilling. Right? Put a little ask out there. Hey, I was just wondering, like, do you want to go to treatment? And get that out of the way so that we can go in and do the intervention.
Wouldn't that be nice if it was that easy?
It would. And unfortunately, I just don't get the calls where it's that easy. I tend to specialize in dealing with the unwilling, so I don't get a lot of those really willing calls.
Yeah.
Well, intervention, it's a big, scary word, but it doesn't have to be a big, scary thing. And I think if we can make the word less scary and we can show that it's a positive thing, and intervention is a really, really good thing.
For everybody.
Yes.
That's the thing. That's the thing that surprised me most as I've learned more and more about the process, is that it really is, it's really for everybody's benefit.
Right.
Because people don't realize, you don't realize sometimes how you communicate with each other. You don't realize how, or how you don't communicate with each other and how that's affecting the whole family structure.
Right. Yeah, if intervention stops being a big, scary word about a process you don't want to try, it can become the best thing you've ever done for your family system around this topic. It doesn't mean everybody has to become mean and unloving or turn your back on someone. It is just a much healthier way to address an unhealthy situation in a family. It's not even addiction specific. We do interventions for behavioral health, mental health, substance abuse, all different types of things. And it's really just about not allowing it to continue the way it has up to this point.
Right.
It's not ignoring it, not pretending.
No, it's a family coming together that all loves each other and loves the person and wants to help them through this thing that they don't seem to be able to help themselves with right now. That was not what I thought intervention was at all.
Right. I doubt that initially you thought it was such an educational process.
I didn't think it was an educational process at all.
Right.
I thought somebody was going to come in and take her away,
Like a
which is what
gunslinger,
I
just,
really wanted them to
yeah.
do.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is they might have taken her away once, but it wouldn't have changed the family system, and it would have been just somebody taking her away.
Right.
Now I can look at this and see, God, when this works, and it works a lot. And when it works, it really changes everybody for the better.
Hmm. Well, that's exactly it. I mean, if it's not, yeah, if you can hire somebody to come in and just take your loved one to treatment, I mean, what does that leave behind? It leaves behind a bunch of people that don't feel like they need to do anything differently. Then the loved
Right.
one comes back.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
unhealthy. And so, I mean, if people could start seeing intervention as a proactive way to deal with something,
Right.
that would be amazing. Unfortunately, most of the calls I get, it's reactive. There was just an incident. We've been waiting for years. I've had
Right.
your card for 6 months. It's all crinkled up. I can barely read the phone number anymore, but I'm calling now because something has to change today.
Right.
And unfortunately, I'd say it's like most other things, human nature. We have to be on the precipice of disaster before we actually reach out to change something. And, as a nation, we struggle with that. As communities, we struggle with that. As families, we struggle with that. And as humans, I mean, I don't usually go on a diet until I'm extremely obese, like it's uncomfortable for me. I'm like, oh, damn, I got to do something about this.
You
And
can't close your pants anymore, so it's
yeah,
time to
exactly.
stop
All
eating.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't wear any of my clothes, so I guess I'll diet,
God,
and
I'm glad
that's,
I never did that.
yeah. I'm sure none of our listeners have
No.
either. But like the idea of what it takes to get someone to actually do something like that. It's like, I
Yeah.
don't want to, but if I have to. And I
Right.
don't think families want to do what needs to be done. But if they have to do it, they will. And that's
Right.
the last resort call that we get. I wish there was some way to either destigmatize the word or educate families about what the word really means or what the process really is, and show them that this could be a proactive tool to prevent it from getting there.
Right.
You have a better chance of helping your loved one if you learn how to talk about it now than if you wait until the wheels have fallen off and then you try to change your behavior.
Yeah.
It's much
And
less
I
chaotic.
and I don't think a good intervention doesn't stop with the person. Hopefully they go into treatment, but that's not
Hmm.
where it stops. This is like,
No.
this continues, and the education continues, and the work on the family continues. And I think that that's really important too. So
Hmm.
this is a whole process of getting a family well, not just the person that goes off to treatment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if it was so the whole gunslinger idea of just coming in one day and then the next day trying to shuffle your kid or loved one off to treatment, I think is what, like you just said, it's what we'd prefer. I don't want to
Yeah.
have to put in all this work and change and do all that stuff, but a real effective intervention that's going to come in and try to address the whole problem is going to spend some time with the family,
Right.
both before and after.
And after.
Yeah,
Right.
especially after.
I don't think people think about that. You know what I mean? Oh, I don't know. I don't think people know that that's really the sign of a good intervention.
Mm,
We have all these people running around saying that they saved people. I saved another one. I saved another one. And that, they did an intervention and saved. That's not how that works.
no.
It doesn't work like that. It doesn't last like that. It's not effective, and it's not a good idea.
Well, I mean, it
In
doesn't
my humble
hurt.
opinion.
Yeah, like it doesn't hurt to get them into treatment. Like that's fantastic. But now
Right.
what?
And
It's
now
like,
what?
and I think that a lot of the pressure comes off for a family. I'll get somebody that's like, I need to do an intervention, and then they'll call me back an hour later and like, I got them to go to detox, and I'm like, oh, so now we don't actually get to do the thing that might keep them in treatment or change the way the family deals with this because the pressure is off, right?
Right.
And then I get the call a month later when like, oh yeah, they left detox and came home to try outpatient, and now we're right back where we were. And that's, that might happen 4 or 5 times before I finally get to step in and just do it. And
This is far too dangerous to put a Band-Aid on.
right.
Yeah. And that's what scares me about stuff like that. Just getting somebody in is not the answer. There was a time in my life when I thought that was the answer, but it's not. There's a lot of work that brought the family to this point, and there's a lot of work that needs to go on in order to make sure that everybody doesn't slip back.
Right. And just to be clear, I mean, if you can get them in, don't not get them in
Of course.
while you
Yeah.
wait for something else. But like
Yeah.
it's because I mean, I'd rather have somebody in treatment and alive so that I can address the issue later. Or we could
Absolutely.
do the intervention in detox, or we could do the intervention from
Right.
a program. It doesn't have to
Right.
happen at home. But I agree. Like I think it would be much healthier for a family to look at the whole situation and say, you know what, we've been trying this for weeks, months, or years, and we're not getting the results that we want. Why don't we have somebody else come in and consult with them and let them advise us professionally on what the right next thing to do is?
Right. So I think that the idea that the intervention is on the whole family and not just on the person of that you're concerned about. It's not
Right.
just the person that needs to go into that is the difference between what I feel like is a family focused intervention, which is in my opinion the best kind of an intervention, and just somebody that's saving another life,
Mhm.
dragging because we want to stay in that healthy place.
Right.
So,
So, I would say that probably translates across really anything that a family's struggling with, or even just people in general. Like, do you want to fix the thing, or do you just not want to feel the symptom? Right.
absolutely. Yeah.
And, I got to say that, and I put this in my book, which you did read, even though I didn't read yours, but like, the that the
Move aside. Everybody needs to see that it's moved to the top of the
right there,
pile.
yes, top
Okay,
of the
there you are.
pile. It's actually coming with me this weekend. It's gonna get addressed.
Okay.
But
Do the thing, Mike.
I will do the thing. I'll do the thing. It's right there. It's right there. So, but what I was saying is that, when you have like the flu, right? Wait, what were we just talking about? Why did I just get lost there for a second? Bring me back.
What were we saying? It's about doing something that's going to last. And
Oh, the symptoms and stuff. The bandit. Yeah. Okay.
Symptoms. Yeah, there you go.
So like when I have the flu and I have my head is, a mess and I got boogers coming out of my nose and I'm coughing and I have a sore throat. I'm not trying to get rid of the flu. I'm not trying to address why I got the flu. I'm not thinking about all the things that could have happened. I literally just don't want to feel what's happening right now.
Right.
And that's it. And so, I think that could be said for just about everything that we go through. Like, I just don't want to feel what I'm feeling right now. And once that's gone, maybe I'll work on that other stuff. So to get a family system to step in and be like, you know what, this has been going on for long enough. I've had the flu for like 5 years now, and I'm sick of just taking Dayquil and NyQuil to not feel the symptoms. Can we figure out why this keeps happening? And to get a family to do that, just like, how do you get an addict or an alcoholic to choose treatment? A lot of times it's because they have to have failed multiple times first. So it would be wonderful if the first time they came, they're like, you know what, I clearly can't do this, and they go to treatment. Just like it would be wonderful if a family came in and proactively pursued intervention. But as wonderful as that would be, and as much as I want that, odds are the family's going to have to miss out on a couple other previous attempts before they call.
It would be nice if as a family, they can step back and think about all the times that they failed in the past with other people or with other things, as it being a cohesive unit, and not have to do this, not have to watch somebody do this 10 times because
the fear,
of how
fear
dangerous
and
this is. Yeah.
Because even if you found out and you're like, you know what, we need to do something about this, that means that you now have to reach outside of your family, right? That now means that people might find out. That means that you're going to have to take action, and you have to go the distance so that your loved one can prove to you that they can't do it from home. Because who wants to step in and disrupt somebody's life and cause, pull them from work or school or the kids or whatever without just cause?
Oh God, how I wish I had done that right from the beginning.
Well, that's what I mean. You don't know that until you're into it, but I agree with you. Like, it would be so much better if we just handled it first.
Right. So when you read the book, you'll see that there was a very beginning.
Yeah.
And had I done that.
I read the first page, just so we're clear. I know about the beginning. All right.
No, I mean like the first chapter or two.
Yeah.
So in the very beginning, had I reached out and brought my whole family together and done this thing that helped her,
Mm-hmm.
I can see how, because I didn't have to fail a whole bunch of times with her. My whole family had failed for a very long time in doing lots of other things that weren't this, but the way we communicated with each other, with the way we dealt with problems and stuff. The Irish Catholic closed mouth, don't air your dirty laundry. That stuff never worked for anybody.
Right.
So if somebody would have set me down and said, listen, you have a way in your family of doing this that is not working. It's never worked.
You guys suck at this.
We suck at it. We're good at a lot of things, very resilient, very strong, but that did not work. And had somebody said, you know what, we can change the way you deal with even things in the future, because now you'll have dealt with this.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, this might be, life changing for her before all the yets. I haven't done this yet and
Right.
that yet, and that hadn't happened yet. Oh boy.
Well, where do we get access to people? Like, how do parents and families open their mind to the idea of sitting down? I mean, maybe it's not the work, maybe it's not intervention. I mean, that's just one form of meeting with a family. Like that's our topic today, is intervention. But I mean,
It could be just family counseling.
well, that's it. It's just sitting
Yeah.
down with a professional. Like I've alluded to that, but I think people might be thinking interventionist, but just sitting down with any professional in this field and just sorting through it and being like, what am I doing? Is this helping? Is it hurting? Am I loving them appropriately in a healthy way? Or am I just contributing,
Right.
And I guess an interventionist does play that role, because by the time we meet with a family, it's like, all right, we got to go through everything that you've tried up to this point to show you what you should be doing. And so we get there. But if a family's not ready for intervention, it doesn't mean that they're not ready for change. And it doesn't mean that they can't get help. And I know there's educational services and support groups across the board, that people should be looking into. I know you do some family recovery coaching stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And, I think that's become a real big resource for families, is to sit down and have these multi-day or multi-week educational experiences, either through webinars or video or in person or in support groups, where they're learning the tools before it's too late. Not waiting for all the wheels to fall off. They're like, you know what, I could see this becoming a problem. I should probably go learn about this.
Yeah.
And maybe it doesn't come with all the same stigma of saying we're doing an intervention. It's just, no, I'm just learning about this. I'm just, I go once a week and just learn about this.
And I was all too willing to go to therapy myself, because of course I thought that, I'm screwed up. This is why this is happening.
Yeah.
Instead of going somewhere where I could have learned about how to deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that existed then, or it might have, and I wouldn't have known how to find it. So that's why I'm glad we're talking about this, because like you said, there's lots of different ways of doing this, whether it's, a family coach, whether it's just a family therapist, or whether it's an intervention or even a non-traditional kind of intervention.
Or you can just read a book.
You could read a book. You could read both of those books.
Yeah, read a good book. Yeah,
no,
read a good book about addiction.
They should come together. Your book and my book. Read my book, and then you'll be like that, and then they read your book.
What we'll do is we'll tell Amazon. We'll have them pack them together.
I think they should.
If You Love Me and Loving Lions.
Yeah, well, I think there's lots of good things coming from the two of us. I think, in the future,
Mm-hmm.
as far as helping getting the families well.
Big things on the horizon.
Yes, and that's all
right.
I'm going to say about that.
Well, I will say this to all of our listeners. We just had a really, really interesting conversation about a topic that, maybe some of you are familiar with, some of you aren't. I would definitely consider doing your research, making sure that you find the right person for your situation. But the most important thing that you can do, and this is just my opinion, is that you can find peer support. Talk to other people that have tried things. I mean, it's like you're not in a silo. You may feel alone. You may feel like it's only happening to you. You may feel like your situation is so unique and so special because it's your loved one who is so unique and so special. But the problem is not.
No.
And the side effects are not. And the family's response is not special and unique. It's the same. And there's other people that have been through what you're going through and that have come out on the other side, and they have good advice. They have good direction. Or more importantly, they just know how you feel.
No, and there's such value in just somebody saying me too.
Right.
There's just nothing like it. And I love the in-person meetings like Learn to Cope. But Magnolia has the support pages where you can go on, all free. There's no one selling anything. There's no one pushing anything on there.
Yep.
You go in there and there are thousands of people that can say me too. And you don't have to write anything or talk. Nobody can see what happens unless you're in the group. But these are all people that are going through it and that need support and need to give support too, because even, just like AA or any other, we get better. And when we get better, it feels so good to give back, that feeling of that full circle.
Or just remembering why you were there in the first place, like getting so caught up that your loved one's doing so well that you forget just how sick you were previously, and being at
Yes.
that meeting and seeing like someone come through the door for the first time and you're like, oh my God, I remember that. And checking yourself, like, have I actually worked on those things, or did I just forget about them because my loved one's doing so well right now?
You know, it's funny that I posted something on the family page today about part of being happy is making the decision. You wake up with the decision, I'm going to be happy today. And I know
Mhm.
that that's very difficult sometimes, and almost impossible sometimes
Right.
when you're going through all this. But I do think it's a decision, because you can sink into it, or you can try to force yourself. Oh
Uh-oh.
my
Do we
God.
do? Are we losing your voice here?
The worst thing in the whole world. My whole family's been praying for this to happen one day.
Uh-oh. Don't get sick.
But that decision to go with happiness, to go with
Hmm.
positivity, and reminding yourself of that. And it takes work, and it takes, practice, but it is possible to have the intention of being happy when you wake up in the morning and
Right.
go
Like
about your day.
Mondays don't suck. It's just another day.
Right.
Your
And the more
mindset about Mondays sucks, but
right, and the
Mondays
more
don't
we
suck.
say that Mondays sucked, but there was somebody who responded on the page that said, "Well, we can't expect our loved ones to do that, because, right in the beginning, because their brains haven't healed."
Mm,
And she had a good point, but I wasn't talking about our loved ones. I was
no.
talking about her, and it was
Mhm.
funny because she didn't even catch that, because we become so entrenched in we don't even forget who we are, whether we're even people anymore,
Mhm.
and become
Everything
so
is about how we affect our loved one. What can
everything.
we do? Yeah.
And it's like, and she was being, and some people would think that would is unselfish, and it is to a certain extent, I guess, but to her own detriment. I'm sure that that particular person is probably so worried about their loved one that they aren't doing the things they need to do to be strong and healthy for them.
Hmm.
So
No. Well, I mean, whether it's reaching out to a professional, showing up at a support group, reading a book, whatever it is. I mean, if my child had any illness, I would want to know everything I could know about that
yeah,
illness. And if I chose a doctor to get them treated, I would do my due diligence before I let someone address my child's life-threatening illness. So it's just, it's the same thing. And I really like the idea of treating this like an illness. It does have symptoms. It can be treated. You can get well from it, but it makes you really sick, and it is contagious.
yes.
And if you
Oh
love
yes,
somebody that's sick from this illness, it is contagious, and it is transmitted through your traditional parenting and love and all the stuff that kids get used to, like how my kids can manipulate me. It's because I have spent years teaching them how to do it, showing them all my weaknesses. It's
yep,
amazing.
absolutely. Well, this has been a really good conversation.
It has.
Yeah,
I
I'm
have a,
glad
ch-
we
I
had
have
the
a
chance to
chopper
talk
going
about it.
overhead right now. I don't know if you guys can hear that. I
Well,
think.
no, we can't, because you have this fantastic microphone that doesn't.
Ah, my new microphone. Yes, yes.
Hey,
So
you
if
know
you're
what?
wondering,
I'm gonna start a letter writing campaign for people to write into you that you should read my book.
oh yes,
Look at you.
yes. Flood me with Facebook posts and comments. And
Shame you into
I
reading
mean,
the
if you
book.
really want to make me feel bad, just go onto YouTube and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That'll really show me, you know?
Yes.
Or you know what? Leave a comment on a Facebook post or something like that.
Mike,
Share it. Make me feel real
we're
bad.
gonna get T-shirts made.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Mike won't read her book. And I promise you,
Yes.
it's not your book. It's books.
I'm just teasing
I
you. I don't know
hate
what I'm
reading.
gonna tease you about when you read the book, because
Well,
then I'm gonna have to find something new.
how about you tease me for the big pile of other books that I have down here
No,
that I
that's okay. I'm
still have
okay
to
with that.
read?
You don't have to read this. It's
I love it.
fine.
I love it.
Well, this has been another great conversation.
It has. It has. And if you are listening, please feel free to share this. We have a new episode that comes out roughly every Tuesday of the week. So you can look for those on Facebook. We post on Instagram, which is at CDPod. So if you like Instagram photos and little clips of our episodes, you can go on there. But as I just said previously, you can watch these on YouTube. And if you watch, just subscribe. It's
Yeah.
super simple. If you have a Google account or Gmail account, it'll let you subscribe right there. But we post all this on Facebook. We give you access to all this stuff across the board. And, we just want to make sure that if you have questions, or if you have a topic or something like that you'd like us to hit, Maureen and I spend a lot of time talking about this stuff in the background. But at the end of the day, we talk about what we want to talk about. And
Yeah.
if you want us to talk about something, you got to tell us.
Yeah.
And so we'll keep coming up with cool topics and special guests. But if you have something that you'd like to hear about, I did put this out recently, and we got what was it? CBD was one of the topics. Let me see. There was a couple here. It was CBDs, which I think would be an interesting topic.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to hear people's thoughts on that. And see, and now that I need to find it, I won't be able to find it on my phone because, apparently I wasn't prepared for this.
Oh, it was your question too, which is
It was. I know. Okay, yeah. So here we go. Is CBD, which is definitely something I want to talk about because it comes up, CBD without the THC.
Yep.
What it means, vaping and stuff like that, whether or not it's a good exit plan for somebody that's using opiates, if it's medical, what does that mean?
Well, they got it in oils and all kinds of stuff, massage oils, and there's lots of different.
I think
that
we'll
would
get
be
a guest
interesting
for that. I want a guest for that.
Yeah, somebody that really knows about it. Yeah, that would be awesome.
Maybe even someone here in Mass that's a part of the medical side of it that can advocate for it. Like, I don't mind learning, right? That's what we all want to learn. So,
yep.
So CBD, and then another one, and one of our guests, Joanne Peterson, said, how about siblings and the effects on them? We hear from them a lot, and they don't have a lot of support. And Joanne and I both know a person that I intend to reach out to and see if she'll be a guest on here, which she's been a huge advocate for siblings. And they go through something different.
You want to hear something really strange, really quick? I think I said this on the show. Joanne's son and my son have become friends, and through meeting each other accidentally. How weird is that?
I think you did. You before in our intro with Joanne, you were telling that story, which I think it was hilarious because it was all happenstance. Like, there was
how awesome it is to have somebody else that has also gone through the same thing you've gone through as a sibling.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
No.
So I think that's a great one.
So I definitely want to hear there. And then another one was from a friend here, Jillian, and she said she was asking if we meant like dangers of vaping. And I guess it's, especially with the younger kids, the Juuls, the pods, all that stuff. And I think I was trying to clarify, is it vaping of THC or is it vaping just in general? And I think it's both. I think it's both
too. And keep in mind, we don't always know what they're vaping.
I don't know what's in there.
Yeah.
It just smells like cereal.
Right.
But with vaping, I think it creates a little bit of a culture, kind of like cigarettes did. We almost got cigarettes down to like 4 or 5%, or 6 or 7 or something like that. And
I wonder where the vaping came from. Could it have been the cigarette companies that were losing business?
Could have been.
I guess it could have. Yeah, that's a possibility.
They're doing great now.
Which makes it bad.
They're doing
which makes it bad. Let's all think about that. Mm-hmm. When they said that cigarettes weren't bad, right? I remember my parents, nobody told us it was bad for you. Mm-hmm. Well, you're inhaling something into your lungs, my friends. This is probably not a good thing.
So, big tobacco, big pharma, we went through it with cigarettes, and cigarettes are not addictive. And we went through that with pharma. And, unfortunately, as I said earlier, it's bad that the businesses are doing this, but it's up to the consumer to think about what you're doing too. So,
right.
All right. Well, so we will hit those comments. And if you have other comments, you can comment on any of our Instagram stuff at CD Pod, or you can go and watch this on Facebook and you can comment on there. We read them all. We're happy to read them out loud. So if you've got something you want us to share, please let us know.
Awesome.
And, Maureen, I know you're going to enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to do the same.
I am. I'm going off to a workshop to work on book number 2. So why don't you finish book number 1 before book number 2 comes out, Michael?
I can do that. I like that. I can do that. Just because I know how much lead time you get before that book's coming out. I got you. It's going to happen.
All right. Thank you. Have a good weekend. Bye.
All right. I would like to thank all of our listeners for joining us today on this episode of Collateral Damage. As always, if you'd like to find out all of the different ways that you can listen to and subscribe to our podcast, you can visit our website, which is www.cdpodcast.com. There are many different ways to listen, download, and subscribe, so we encourage you to choose the one that is most appropriate for you. And as always, we would encourage our listeners to get informed and stay connected. Thank you for joining us.